In September 4th, 1942, somewhere south of Gibraltar, a whisper crossed the airwaves, a whisper that shouldn't have existed. The sea was calm that morning, the kind of calm that felt wrong. From the bridge of the HMS Revenant, a British Q-ship disguised as a worn merchant freighter, Captain Edward Mallory scanned the empty horizon. The sun was a pale coin above the Mediterranean, and the air smelled of salt and rust. Below deck, the engines hummed softly, a heartbeat beneath the ship's skin. Somewhere, a spanner clinked against metal, followed by a muffled curse. Everything sounded ordinary, but Mallory's gut told him otherwise. The Revenant had been at sea for 14 days, escorting convoy H-27 from Gibraltar toward Malta. 4 ships had already been lost on similar runs, each ambushed with uncanny accuracy by German U-boats waiting in perfect formation. Every time, the Admiralty's coded frequencies had been used. Every time, the Germans knew exactly where to strike. And now the same route lay ahead of them. Mallory turned to his first officer, Lieutenant Harris, a thin man with a permanent squint. "Any word from command?" Harris shook his head. "Nothing since dawn, sir. Just static on the main frequency." Mallory frowned. "And the auxiliary?" "Clear as glass." That was strange. Too clear. Down in the wireless room, Petty Officer Alan Drake, the ship's young radio operator, sat hunched over the console, headphones pressed tight to his ears. The room glowed faintly with red light, wires hanging like vines from the ceiling. He twisted the dial, searching through the hum of the ether. Then faintly, a pattern emerged. 3 short beeps, 2 long, 3 short again. Morse code, but not theirs. He scribbled it down quickly. Then the signal vanished. Moments later, Harris entered the room. "Anything to report?" Drake hesitated. "Sir, I caught something strange. Could be interference. Or what?" Drake swallowed. "Or someone transmitting from on board." Harris blinked. "From our ship?" Drake nodded slowly. "Yes, sir. It came through the shortwave. Same bandwidth we use for encrypted messages." Harris said nothing. He simply turned, expression unreadable, and left the room. By evening, rumors had already begun. The Revenant was crewed by 40 men, Royal Navy sailors, and a handful of captured German technicians who had stayed aboard after the freighter capture months earlier. They had been vetted, or so the Admiralty claimed. Now eyes lingered a bit longer in the mess. Conversation stopped when someone entered. A dropped spoon sounded like a gunshot. Mallory watched them all from the captain's table. Drake sat near the corner, quietly eating canned stew. Across from him, Chief Engineer Macready, a burly Scotsman, was laughing too loudly at something that wasn't funny. And beside him, one of the Germans, Klaus Brenner, an electrician with sharp features and perfect English, watched everything with calm detachment. Mallory spoke quietly to Harris. "We can't afford suspicion to spread." Harris nodded. "But if Drake's right, we have a traitor aboard." Mallory's gaze returned to Brenner. "Or a ghost." Later that night, the wind picked up. Waves slapped the hull, and the Revenant groaned like a living thing. Mallory walked the deck alone, the sea a dark mirror around him. He stopped near the wireless antenna mast and stared at it, thin, tall, silent. Could it be possible that the Germans had hidden something inside their own ship before capture? A beacon, maybe. A direction finder, something invisible but deadly, transmitting their position every few hours without anyone knowing. He made a note in his pocket journal: "Search the ship's superstructure at dawn." At 02:13 hours, a sudden noise jolted the ship. A metallic bang, sharp and close, echoing through the hull. Drake, half asleep in the radio room, jumped up and checked his instruments. The shortwave indicator was glowing red. Active transmission. He froze. No one was supposed to be sending. He ripped off his headphones and ran into the passageway. The corridor was dark, lit only by a flickering bulb. Footsteps echoed ahead, someone moving fast. "Who's there?" he shouted. No answer. He sprinted after the sound, rounding the corner toward the lower deck. But when he reached the cargo hold, it was empty. Only the shadows of crates and the distant hum of machinery. And then, from behind a stack of boxes, came a faint click, like a relay shutting off. He raised his flashlight. The beam caught a small metal box mounted to the bulkhead. Wires ran into it, freshly cut. Someone had been here. The next morning, Drake reported everything to Captain Mallory. Mallory examined the metal box carefully on his desk. It was small, painted grey, with no markings. "Looks like part of an old communications relay," Mallory muttered. "But this ship's been refitted twice since capture." Harris frowned. "Meaning it shouldn't be here?" Mallory looked up at Drake. "Where exactly did you find it?" "Starboard cargo hold, sir, near the bulkhead behind the German storage area." Mallory's jaw tightened. "Get Brenner up here." Moments later, Klaus Brenner entered, his uniform clean, his posture perfect. Mallory held up the device. "Ever seen one of these?" Brenner studied it briefly. "Yes, Captain. It's part of a naval signal amplifier, standard on Kriegsmarine freighters. It boosts transmission power across certain frequencies." "Could it be used to send a beacon?" Brenner's eyes met his. "If modified, yes." "Did you modify it?" "No, Captain. When we surrendered this ship, all our radio equipment was seized." Mallory watched him carefully. "You're saying someone installed this after capture?" Brenner shrugged slightly. "If so, it wasn't me." By noon, the Revenant entered rougher seas. The deck tilted and rain lashed against the bridge windows. Carter's voice came through the speaking tube from below. "Captain, our radar's picking up movement. Bearing east, range 6 miles. Mallory stiffened. "U-boat?" "Too early to tell, sir." He grabbed the binoculars, scanning the horizon through sheets of rain. Nothing but grey water. Then the first officer shouted, "Message from convoy H-27, they're under attack. Coordinates match our last report." Mallory's heart sank. That meant the Germans had known their position again. He slammed his fist against the console. "That's impossible. We changed frequency 6 times, Harris whispered. "Unless the signal came from us." Mallory turned toward the grey box on his desk. "Destroy it! Every wire, every circuit, now!" By nightfall, the storm had broken. The Revenant was quiet again, the sea calm but heavy with dread. Mallory sat alone in his cabin, writing in his logbook. "Something aboard this ship speaks when we do not. Whether it is man or machine, I will find it before it kills us all." He closed the book, the candlelight flickering over his face. Outside, thunder rolled far away over the sea. Down below, in the radio room, Drake had fallen asleep at his post. The red light of the console glowed faintly against his face, and just before midnight, as the ship drifted under a silver moon, the same pattern began again. 3 short beeps, 2 long, 3 short. This time no one heard it. In September 6, 1942, 2 days after the mysterious transmission, the walls of the ship began to whisper. The HMS Revenant drifted through grey water under a bruised morning sky. The storm had passed, but its echoes still rolled beneath the waves. The men were quieter now. Even the sea seemed to listen. Captain Edward Mallory stood on the bridge, one gloved hand resting on the compass housing. His eyes traced the horizon, nothing but mist and emptiness. The Admiralty's latest order had arrived by encrypted signal at dawn: hold position, await further instruction. To the men, it was just another delay. To Mallory, it felt like bait. They had already lost one convoy, convoy H-27, sunk in the night. Every time a new transmission came, the Germans were already waiting. And now, after Drake's discovery of the hidden signal box, Mallory could no longer dismiss the truth. Someone, or something, was sending from aboard the ship. In the mess deck, Petty Officer Drake sipped cold tea, eyes fixed on the table. The memory of that red glowing relay haunted him. He could still hear the faint beeping in his dreams. Across the table, Chief Engineer Macready slammed his mug down. "Ghosts, is it? Now you've got the lads jumping at shadows. Maybe next you'll tell me the hulls whisper in Morse code." Drake didn't look up. "It wasn't a ghost, sir. Someone's transmitting." Macready snorted. "Transmit this, lad. Keep your mouth shut and fix your radio." From the far end of the room, a calm voice interrupted. Klaus Brenner, the German electrician, leaned forward. "Perhaps the petty officer is correct. Machines remember, Captain. This ship was once German. Its bones might still speak their old language." A few sailors laughed uneasily. Macready's eyes narrowed. "Careful with your poetry, Fritz." Brenner only smiled faintly. "I was an engineer, not a poet, but I know when something alive hums beneath steel." Later that morning, Mallory called a meeting in the captain's quarters. Present, himself, Harris, Macready, Drake, and Brenner. On the table lay a set of blueprints, thin, oil-stained papers showing every wire and bulkhead of the Revenant. Mallory tapped his pen against the plans. "We'll search every compartment from bow to stern, no area untouched. Brenner, you'll guide Macready through the old German systems. You know what might have been left behind." Macready grumbled. "You trust in him now?" Mallory's voice was steady. "I trust results, Chief, not opinions." Brenner nodded once. "Understood." Harris added, "We'll sweep the antenna circuits first, then the engine room conduits. If something's hiding in the metal, we'll find it." Mallory looked around the room. "Good, because until we do, no messages, no flares, no signals. This ship goes dark." The search began at noon. The men fanned out across the decks, crawling through narrow maintenance shafts and cargo compartments. The sound of tools echoed faintly through the steel corridors. In the engine room, the air was thick with oil and heat. Macready wiped sweat from his brow as he and Brenner pried open an old control panel. Brenner's fingers traced the wires delicately, like a man reading Braille. "These aren't British," he murmured. "They're pre-war German relays. Handmade, older than the war itself." Macready frowned. "You saying your lot planted these before we captured her?" Brenner didn't answer. Instead, he pointed to a cluster of wires buried deep behind a junction box. "There, that doesn't belong." Macready reached in with pliers and tugged. A spark jumped. The lights flickered. "Easy!" Brenner barked. Something clicked deep in the wall. Then faintly, the sound of static filled the air. Drake's voice crackled over the engine room intercom. "Captain, picking up a shortwave pulse again. It's coming from below decks." Macready cursed. "Below us?" Brenner's eyes widened. "The ballast compartments." Mallory was there minutes later, descending the ladder into the narrow, damp space below the engine deck. The air smelled of rust and seawater. The floor was slick. Harris followed with a lantern, its light glinting off the cold metal. "There," Harris said, pointing to the far bulkhead. Something metallic had been bolted to the wall, a small, square panel, humming softly. Mallory approached cautiously. "That wasn't on the blueprints." Drake climbed down after them, notebook in hand. "Sir, that frequency spike, it's right on our old convoy signal." Mallory knelt, pressing his hand against the panel. It was warm. He looked to Brenner. "Open it." Brenner hesitated. "If it's a transmitter, it might be booby-trapped." Mallory's voice hardened. "Open it." Brenner exhaled and loosened the bolts. The panel came free with a metallic creak. Inside, a tangle of copper wires and a small cylinder pulsed with faint red light. "Mein Gott," Brenner whispered. "It's a frequency modulator, but this design, it's not German Navy issue, it's different." "Different how?" Mallory asked. "Too small, too precise. This was built by hand recently." Harris stepped forward. "You mean someone installed it after we took the ship?" Brenner nodded slowly. "Someone who knows both systems, ours and yours." All eyes turned to Drake. He shook his head quickly. "Sir, I didn't—" Mallory raised a hand. "No accusations, not yet." He stood, staring at the glowing cylinder. "Can you disable it?" Brenner nodded. "Yes, but whoever built it will know." Mallory's eyes stayed fixed on the light. "Then let them know." That night, the air aboard the Revenant grew heavy. Every corridor seemed to hum. Every pipe carried faint echoes. The men avoided the lower decks altogether. Mallory sat in his cabin, writing his nightly log. "We found the heart of the signal, a device buried in our ship's bones. Not German design, something new, something deliberate. The men are restless. I can't tell them yet, but I fear this ship is haunted. Not by ghosts, but by hands that still move unseen." He closed the book. The lantern flickered once, then steadied. Outside, footsteps passed by his door. Slow, heavy, measured. He listened. The steps stopped, then started again, this time from the other side of the wall, the other side of the wall. He grabbed his revolver and followed the sound down the corridor, his boots soft against the metal floor. The noise grew faint, leading him toward the storage bay. He stopped before the bulkhead door and pressed his ear against it. A faint tapping came from within, 3 short, 2 long, 3 short, the same pattern. Mallory stepped back, lifted the latch, and pulled the door open. Inside, the bay was empty except for crates and darkness. The tapping had stopped. He raised his lantern and froze. On the steel wall, someone had scratched a message into the paint with a knife. "You cannot silence what is already listening." Mallory's breath fogged in the cold air. He backed out slowly and sealed the door. When he turned, Harris was standing behind him, pale. "Sir, what did you find?" Mallory didn't answer. He simply whispered, "We're not hunting a spy anymore. We're living inside one." On September 8, 1942, the ship itself began to breathe. By dawn, the HMS Revenant was sailing through calm waters again. The storm had cleared, but inside the ship, the tension only deepened. Men spoke in whispers now, moving through corridors that seemed to hum back at them. Captain Edward Mallory had not slept. The message carved into the bulkhead echoed in his thoughts. You cannot silence what is already listening. Every noise, the click of a latch, the hiss of steam, felt like a signal. The men avoided the lower decks, especially the compartment where the strange transmitter had been found. Mallory stood at the bridge window, staring at the horizon. The sea looked normal, yet something in the ship's rhythm felt wrong, like a heartbeat out of sync. Lieutenant Harris entered quietly. "Sir Chief Macready wants to see you in the engine room. Says he's found something new." Mallory turned. "Does it hum?" Harris frowned. "Everything hums now, sir." In the engine room, Macready stood beside a steel bulkhead, his sleeves rolled up and his face slick with sweat. A narrow metal panel lay open behind him, wires spilling out like veins. "Sir," he said, pointing to a copper coil, "this shouldn't even exist. It's connected straight to the hull. Every vibration, every knock, even our engines, it's all being amplified." Mallory knelt beside him. "Amplified for what?" "A signal." "Not just a signal," Macready said. "A receiver. Whoever built this, they weren't sending, they were listening." Drake, crouched nearby, added, "Captain, I checked the power feed. It draws current only when we run the radar. The ship's own systems are powering it." Mallory's jaw tightened. "So when we use our radar..." "It listens," Drake finished quietly. Macready wiped his hands. "Sir, this ship's a bloody microphone." Later that afternoon, Mallory gathered his senior men in the chart room. The air was heavy, the silence louder than words. He laid a small, red glowing cylinder, the dismantled heart of the hidden device, on the table. "This," Mallory said, "wasn't built by any navy I know. It's precise, modern and British-made. Someone inside our own supply chain installed it." Harris stiffened. "Are you saying we're carrying a British spy?" Mallory looked at the device. "No, Lieutenant. I'm saying we're carrying British technology. Used against us?" Brenner spoke up from the corner, his German accent soft but steady. Captain, in Germany we called this Hawkgerät. Listening gear. But nothing this small ever left our labs," Drake frowned. "You're saying both sides might be using it?" Brenner hesitated. "I'm saying war breeds mirrors. You build a weapon and someone else builds its reflection," McCready muttered. "We're caught between both mirrors then," Mallory said quietly, "or trapped inside them." That night the Revenant drifted silently under blackout. No lights, no radar. The sea was calm, the stars sharp above. The men slept uneasily, wrapped in blankets against the cold metal. The ship creaked softly, an old hull breathing in its sleep. Then, sometime past midnight, the static began. A low whisper, faint at first, filtered through the pipes. It wasn't radio. It was vibration, like a voice trapped in the walls. In his bunk, Drake opened his eyes. The sound was steady now, a pulse that rose and fell. He sat up and listened closely. 3 short, 2 long. 3 short, froze. The same pattern. He ran barefoot down the corridor toward the radio room, heart pounding. The static grew louder. When he burst in, the radio lights were already flickering. Harris was there, pale-faced, staring at the signal scope. "Sir," Drake gasped, "it's happening again!" Harris nodded. "It's coming from us." From inside the ship, minutes later, Mallory arrived. The sound now filled the entire vessel, a deep, rhythmic pulse. The metal walls trembled softly as though alive. Drake's voice shook. "Captain, I shut the power." "The radio's off, the generator's off, everything's off." "Then what's making that noise?" Mallory demanded. Brenner entered quietly, holding a stethoscope he'd taken from the infirmary. He pressed it to the bulkhead, listening. "It's not in the circuits," he said softly. "It's in the hull." "The steel is vibrating," McCready frowned. "How can steel vibrate without power?" Brenner looked up slowly. "It can if it's responding to an external frequency. Something's calling to it." Mallory gripped the edge of the console. "From where?" Brenner hesitated. "From below." They descended into the ballast compartments again, lanterns flickering in the damp air. The hum grew louder with every step. At the lowest deck, where seawater sloshed between the metal plates, the noise became almost unbearable. The very floor trembled. Drake pointed to a narrow seam in the wall. "Sir," light. A faint red glow pulsed from inside the seam, like blood through a vein. Mallory pried at it with his knife, and the panel loosened, revealing another device, smaller this time, half submerged in seawater. Brenner crouched beside it, eyes wide. "It's a resonance unit. A network of them, maybe. Your entire hull could be linked. They're using the sea itself as a conductor," Mallory whispered. "Listening through the ocean?" Brenner nodded. "And maybe more. Maybe talking through it." McCready's voice was a rasp. "Then who's on the other end?" No one answered. Back on the bridge, Mallory ordered the engines stopped. The Revenant floated motionless in the dark, like a tomb. He stood alone at the window, watching the still black sea. His reflection stared back at him in the glass, pale and ghost-like. For a moment, he thought he saw movement, a shimmer beneath the surface, a flash of something metallic far below. Then it was gone. Harris entered softly. "Sir, if this equipment's British, shouldn't we report it?" Mallory turned slowly. "Report to whom, Lieutenant?" "The same people who put it here?" Harris said nothing. Mallory looked back out to sea. "They called it the Gibraltar Run, but maybe we're the ones being run." The hum finally died just before dawn. The ship was silent again, but no one slept. Drake sat alone by the mess porthole, staring out at the dark horizon. His hands shook as he held his mug. Brenner joined him quietly. "You believe in ghosts, petty officer?" Drake gave a tired smile. "After this, I believe in anything." Brenner looked at the sea. "Not everything that haunts you wears a sheet. Some ghosts hum in the metal and wait for you to listen." In his log, Mallory wrote, "The Revenant no longer feels like a ship. It feels like an ear pressed against the ocean, listening for something vast and patient. If this is technology, it's far beyond anything I've seen. If it's something else, then perhaps the sea remembers more than men ever should." He closed the book. The ink trembled slightly on the page. Somewhere deep below, unseen in the cold water, a light flickered once. Then the ocean whispered back. In September 10th, 1942, the sea began to speak in voices they recognized. The HMS Revenant moved slowly through the morning fog, her engines beating low and cautious. To any ship nearby, she looked like a shadow, a merchant freighter ghosting through the strait. But within her hull, every man felt the same truth. This was no longer an ordinary voyage. Captain Edward Mallory had forbidden the use of all radio equipment. The transmitter compartments were sealed, and the lights dimmed to half power. Yet still, the humming came and went like a breath. The sound had become part of the ship, like the tide under her skin. Mallory stood on the bridge, coffee untouched beside him. His face was drawn, sleepless. Lieutenant Harris stood at his side, scanning the fog through binoculars. "Visibility's down to 300 yards, Harris murmured. "Good," Mallory replied softly. "Maybe even ghosts can't find us in this." Below deck, Chief Macready and Petty Officer Drake were back in the engine room, running quiet checks on the valves. The air was warm and metallic, smelling of oil and steam. "Feels like the ship's breathing, don't it?" Drake muttered. "You hear that rhythm?" Macready grunted. "Been hearing it since Sicily. Ship's grown, lad. Always have." But as Drake bent to tighten a bolt, a faint whisper drifted through the pipes above. A man's voice, low, rhythmic, almost speaking words. He froze. "Sir, you hear that?" Macready paused, listening. The whisper came again, clearer now, almost human. "Turn. Port. 7 degrees." Drake's eyes went wide. "That's the captain's voice." Macready straightened sharply. "You've lost it, lad." But then it came again, this time unmistakable. Mallory's voice echoing through the steel. "Turn port 7 degrees. Stay in formation." Macready paled. "Formation? We're alone out here." Drake backed away from the pipe. "Sir, I swear—" "Quiet," Macready hissed. The whisper stopped. Only the deep pulse of the engines remained. Minutes later, they stood before Mallory on the bridge, pale and uneasy. Mallory frowned. "My voice? Through the pipes?" Drake nodded quickly. "Aye, sir. Clear as if you were speaking beside me." Harris leaned against the chart table. "It could be a relay echo." "Pressure from the steam lines." Brenner shook his head. "No, the voice followed sentence structure. Machines don't mimic tone that perfectly." Mallory turned toward Brenner. "What do you think it means?" Brenner hesitated. "It means the frequency network might not just listen, it might record voices, commands, even us." "Record," Macready barked. "You're saying it's playing back our own talk?" "Not exactly," Brenner replied. "It's using us, reconstructing voices from what it hears." Mallory's jaw tightened. "Then someone's feeding it information." Brenner's eyes flicked toward the bulkhead. "Or it's feeding itself." That night, the fog thickened. The crew was ordered to half alert. No one spoke loudly. Only the wind moved, the faint whine of it against the rigging. In his cabin, Mallory poured a measure of whiskey and stared at the open logbook. His pen hovered above the page. The sound no longer feels mechanical. The men report hearing commands, voices not their own. Some claim to hear the sea whispering through the hull, words too quiet to understand. I've served 20 years at sea. I've never feared the ocean. Tonight, I do. He set the pen down. Then from the wall behind him a voice murmured, "Captain Mallory, convoy approaching. South by east." Mallory froze. The glass in his hand trembled. It was Harris's voice. He turned sharply, staring at the wall. "Harris?" No answer, only the whisper of the waves outside. At dawn, Harris entered the bridge, unaware of what Mallory had heard. Mallory studied him closely. "Did you call me last night?" Harris blinked. "No, sir. I was asleep." Mallory's voice dropped. "I heard your voice. Through the wall." The lieutenant frowned. "Sir, with respect, we've all been hearing things lately." "Not like this," Mallory said quietly. It gave coordinates. Brenner entered just then, holding a small metal cylinder, the same type they'd found earlier. "Captain," he said, "I've been tracing the resonance pattern. These devices aren't just amplifiers, they translate vibration into frequency. It's possible the sea itself carries memory, echoes of sound we can't normally hear." "Echoes?" Mallory repeated. "Imagine shouting into a canyon," Brenner explained. "Now imagine the canyon shouting back, days later, in someone else's voice." Drake swallowed hard. "So, the ship's talking to us? Or the ocean?" Brenner looked down. "At this point, I can't tell them apart." By midday, the fog began to thin. A faint outline appeared on the horizon, grey and ghost-like. Harris raised his binoculars. "Ship ahead!" Mallory took them, focusing on the silhouette. The hull was low, its paint worn off by salt. He frowned. "Looks like one of ours, but..." The ship's flag was gone. No markings, no signal lamps, just a dead vessel drifting silently. "Helm, steady!" Mallory ordered. "Approach with caution." As they drew closer, the outline grew clearer. A merchant ship, battered and listing. No movement on deck. Drake whispered, "She's dead in the water," Macready muttered. "Looks like a mirror of us." Indeed, the resemblance was eerie. The same shape, same structure, even the same rust patterns along the hull. It was like staring at their reflection. Mallory raised his voice. "Signal her! Identify!" No response. Harris turned to him. "Sir, there's no crew." Brenner leaned forward. "Captain, listen." The wind carried faint whispers across the water, like distant radio chatter, voices half drowned by static. Mallory ordered the engines to idle. The Revenant and the ghost ship drifted side by side. Through his binoculars, Mallory saw a name etched faintly across the other ship's stern. He whispered the words aloud. "HMS Revenant." The men froze. Drake's voice broke the silence. "That's us, sir." For several long seconds no one moved. The air seemed to thicken. Even the sea went quiet, waiting. Mallory lowered the binoculars slowly. "That's impossible." Brenner's voice was low. "Not impossible, Captain. I told you, the sea remembers." Mallory turned to him sharply. "You're saying that's an echo?" "An echo made flesh," Brenner said softly. "A projection, maybe a message." Macready crossed himself quietly. "Then what's it trying to say?" Before anyone could answer, the ghost ship began to list. The hull cracked, groaning like a dying whale. Then, as the fog rolled back in, it started to sink. The seas swallowed it slowly, without sound or splash. Only the faint hum remained, vibrating through the Revenant's deck, matching her heartbeat once again. That night, no one slept. Mallory stood alone on deck, the cold wind biting his face. He watched the Black Sea ripple beneath him. From the depths, faint lights flickered, like lanterns underwater. He whispered to himself, "If the sea can remember, what else can it repeat?" Behind him, Brenner appeared quietly. "Captain," he said softly. Whatever that was, it wasn't the past. It was a warning. Mallory turned. A warning from who? Brenner looked out at the endless water. From ourselves, perhaps, from what we've already done. In the ship's log, Mallory wrote his final entry for the day. "We have seen our own ghost. Whether made of steel or memory, I do not know. The men believe we are cursed. I believe we are being studied by something that wears the sea as its face." He closed the book and blew out the lamp. The hull hummed once, deep and slow. Then faintly, through the floorboards, came a whisper, his own voice repeating his log word for word. In September 13th, 1942, the HMS Revenant finally spoke back. The sea was flat as glass, no wind, no horizon, just a pale grey world where sky and ocean bled into each other. The Revenant floated like a ghost on an endless mirror. Captain Edward Mallory hadn't slept in 2 days. The whispers had grown stronger, no longer random. They now formed sentences, orders, pleas. Sometimes they spoke in his own voice, sometimes in the voices of men long dead. He no longer trusted his ears. He barely trusted the ship beneath him. Still, duty held him. The Admiralty's last message was clear. Rendezvous with convoy P-14, then return to Gibraltar. But convoy P-14 never appeared. Only silence waited on every frequency. In the mess hall, the crew sat in uneasy quiet. Even their spoons clinked softer now. Petty Officer Drake pushed his food around his plate. "It's like the whole ocean's listening," he said quietly. Across from him, Chief Macready muttered, "I've worked engines 40 years, never met one that listens back." From the far end of the room, Brenner spoke without looking up. "You're wrong, Chief. Every machine listens. You just never notice until it answers." Macready glared. "And what do you suppose it's answering to, eh?" Brenner looked up, eyes hollow. "Us." Later, on the bridge, Lieutenant Harris approached the captain. "Sir, permission to speak freely?" Mallory nodded. "The men are at the edge. They swear they hear voices whispering from the hull at night. Some say it's the convoy calling. Others say it's the sea. We can't keep this up much longer." Mallory looked out at the horizon. "Do you hear it, Lieutenant?" Harris hesitated. "Yes, sir. I heard my wife's voice last night. She's been dead for 2 years." Neither man spoke for a long time after that. The hum beneath their feet filled the silence. Finally, Mallory said quietly, "Set course west. If this is madness, we'll ride it home." By evening, the wind returned, a low, moaning gust from the north. The Revenant creaked as she turned. In the engine room, Macready and Brenner worked side by side, sealing the ballast valves. "Pressure's stable," Macready grunted. "For once." Brenner wiped his hands on a rag. "Captain's right to turn back. The sea's not safe here." "Since when was the sea ever safe?" Brenner gave a faint smile. "It used to be honest, at least." As they worked, a new vibration rippled through the deck, different this time. A deep thrum, steady and rhythmic, like a coded pulse. Brenner froze. "That's not us." Macready frowned. "You sure?" "It's too regular. It's speaking." Before they could react, the lights flickered and died. The engine noise vanished. Then the voice came, not through the speakers, not through the pipes, through the steel itself. "Revenant, this is convoy P-14. Identify—" Drake's voice crackled through the intercom from the bridge. "Sir, picking up a signal, it's the convoy." Mallory raced up the ladder, Harris at his heels. The radio room was alive with noise, static hissing, dials spinning, the red light flickering madly. Drake shouted over the chaos. "It's them, Captain. British code. Convoy channel coming in clean." Mallory grabbed the receiver. "This is HMS Revenant. Identify P-14. For a moment, only static replied. Then, clear as a bell, came a voice. "Revenant, you're out of position. Fall in line. Fall in line." Mallory froze. The voice was his own. Harris's eyes went wide. "Sir, that's you." The radio hissed again. The same voice repeated. "Fall in line and you're out of position." Drake whispered. "It's not the convoy, it's the echo." Mallory slammed the receiver down. "Cut power!" But the lights surged brighter instead, flooding the bridge in a red glow. The ship shuddered violently. Through the glass, the sea began to ripple, concentric rings spreading outward, like something vast stirring beneath them. Brenner's voice came over the intercom. "Captain, the ballast tanks are pressurizing themselves. We're taking water." Mallory barked orders, but the sound was swallowed by the rising hum, a roar now deep and inhuman. The sea began to boil. The Revenant lurched sideways as water surged through her lower decks. Men scrambled, shouting, slipping in the dark. Drake clung to the bulkhead, shouting, "It's the hull! It's vibrating itself apart!" Brenner's voice screamed through the intercom. "The resonance! Captain, it's matching the ship's own frequency! It's tearing us!" The transmission cut off in static. Mallory grabbed Harris by the arm. "Get to the lifeboats!" "But, sir—" "Go!" Harris hesitated 1 second too long. A metal beam tore loose above them, slamming into the deck. The light shattered. Mallory stumbled through the smoke toward the stairwell. The sound of the sea was deafening now, 100 voices rising together, merging into one enormous whisper. "Fall in line! Fall in line!" Above deck, the air was chaos. Men ran toward the lifeboats, faces pale in the red light. The ocean glowed faintly around the hull, pulsing with the same rhythm as the ship. Macready appeared from the smoke, dragging Brenner, who was bleeding from the head. "She's going, Captain," Macready shouted. "We've got minutes!" Mallory looked out at the glowing water. The reflection staring back wasn't his ship anymore. It was the ghost one they had seen before, perfect and silent. The hum reached its peak, a sound so deep it made their bones ache. Brenner's voice was faint. "Captain, it's calling us home." Mallory stared at him. "What home?" Brenner smiled weakly. "The one that listens." And then the sea split. A wall of water rose on both sides, glowing with a cold white light. The ship groaned once, long and low, before the ocean swallowed her whole. Hours later, the fog cleared. A British patrol cutter found wreckage scattered across calm water. Planks, barrels, a single lifeboat half-burned. No survivors. The Admiralty recorded the HMS Revenant as lost, presumed sunk in the Strait of Gibraltar. No enemy contact was ever confirmed. But radio operators at Gibraltar swore that for 3 nights after her disappearance, they received faint transmissions on the old convoy frequency, an old British voice repeating the same message over and over. "This is HMS Revenant, holding position, awaiting orders." And then, silence. Epilogue. Narrator's note. They say the sea keeps its secrets, but perhaps it does more than that. Perhaps it keeps copies, echoes of every word, every sound, every soul that ever touched its surface. The Revenant became one of those echoes, forever drifting between the living and the remembered. And if you tune your radio to the right frequency on a foggy night near Gibraltar, you might still hear it, faint and patient, calling through the waves, "Fall in line."